Thanks for joining today's live stream. A special guest, Kevin Geary. Today we're going to talk all about forking WordPress. Do we need to fork WordPress? We're also going to talk about something that he and I chatted about on his podcast called WP Town Hall, which is all about the sort of ethos, the publishing side of WordPress and what that means for individual creators like him, myself, and possibly you watching the show. Like, I'm diehard in blogging. I love that part of WordPress. We're going to talk about publishing and the open web, RSS, podcasting, YouTube, all that fun stuff. We have a great show. Stick around today. Don't forget to say thanks to our pillar sponsors who really make the WP Minute tick. You can find them and all of our sponsors at the WPMinute.com/sponsors, pillar sponsors, Pressable, Bluehost, and Omnisend. Thanks so much for supporting our efforts here at the WP Minute. And also, special announcement, of course, I launched CMS Minute. If you're into the wide world of content management systems, including a little bit of WordPress, check out CMSminute.com, a limited series podcast coming soon, presented by Ghost. Here we go in today's live stream. Special guest, Kevin Geary. Kevin, welcome back to the WP Minute.
Matt, thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
We're just, chatting like we always do in the green room, talking about our investments, not only in dollars, but in time on our YouTube setups. Mine is like having a midlife crisis right now. Yours is looking fantastic. Spending some time and some dollars there in the new Kevin Geary studio.
Yeah. The background's all the same. It's just all lit better than it was. Yep. I redid everything at the beginning of the year. Your
background is some photography, right? Or a bulk of it? Maybe in the digital world you started in photography, roughly?
Yeah, no. I did let's see, when did I start in photography? Probably 2003-ish. Yeah, 2003 I started like heavy into photography and editing and all that stuff. Love it.
The syllabus for today's episode is we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in your world with Etch and WordPress products. We're going to chat about this concept of forking WordPress. Can it be done? Should it be done? Who's going to do it? Ain't me, probably not you, but let's have this conversation. And then I want to talk about the publishing side of WordPress. We talked about it on your podcast a little bit, but I want to go a little bit further on it because I'm seeing, every year I see the walls closing in, expanding a little bit, closing in again. Podcast is dying. Podcast is the best. And I want to chat about like our sort of views on publishing. But first, Etch, what's happening? How's things going? Give us an update. You had a pretty big Twitter thread yesterday. Break it down for us. What's the latest with Etch?
Yeah, so development is going swimmingly, I guess you would say. We're I would say far ahead of schedule. I think from what most people expected the timeline to be. I kind of alluded to the fact that would probably be the case. I was fairly confident, but it is going very well. We are starting our sprint on components. Components functionality is going to be very important for a lot of different reasons, but namely for header and footer functionality. It's going to loop into, obviously, our concept of templating. And once templating, conditional logic, and components, and these three things kind of all rely on each other, so they're all going to get done pretty much at the same time. Once they're done and shipped, I can start building sites with it right now. And I will probably transition. I'm thinking in March. In March, we're going to do another launch. We're going to open it up again. So if people did not get in the initial launch, if they were like, I want to see something first, or I want to make sure these guys can actually do what they say they can do, March will be another opportunity for you to get in. And then I will probably transition all of my YouTube videos from Bricks over to using Etch for everything. And so the general public will be able to get to see it at that point in time. But right now it's just for early adopters.
Excuse me. The one of the part of your thread says we can't just build Etch in secret with the initial 1,500 adopters. We have to feed the public momentum as well, like you mentioned, and you've already transitioned it for me in March. Is that going to be a similar round? I'll call it a round. You can define it, but is it a similar round? Invest, get behind the scenes, or are people going to be able to purchase like a alpha version that they can start downloading right away and just go off to the races? What does it look like for the consumer?
Yeah, there's going to be another round that's exactly like the first round. We'll get on some Zoom calls. The difference being this time, I will just walk them through the actual product, what exists and what's built, what we've done so far, the timeline we've done it in, what's going to happen next. And it'll be an opportunity for them to secure their license, get into the community, be a part of the development process. I mean, we've already had a lot of feedback, like from the initial group, not just feedback on what to do with the actual tool, but and I should probably screenshot these and start to share them, but people are just very high on the fact that they get to participate in this. You know, like they many times, dozens of times, we hear like, all software development should be done like this. And this is such a unique experience that they're getting to be a part of. So yeah, I think it's fantastic for people to get that opportunity.
What's been the biggest challenge so far?
Honestly, the biggest challenge is, you know, there's always a percentage of the community where no matter how much we say, look, this is pre-alpha, or don't expect XYZ yet, they still expect XYZ. And so it's like redirecting them to, like, you know, making sure they understand how software development works and what has to come before something else. And that kind of thing is, I guess, a little bit confusing to people that haven't developed software before.
Let's start to slide this conversation into forking WordPress. And there is something that's needed, right? We need WordPress to survive. I don't want to put words in your mouth. This is how I see it. Am I happy with the current situation? No. Do I always want more out of WordPress? Yes. Can these two things happen at the same time? Not usually. But I think that we need WordPress to survive for the betterment of both of our livelihoods, right? Etch, me at Gravity Forms / doing content around WordPress. Well, you do content as well, but Etch, primary source. Yeah. We need these things. We need WordPress to survive, and we're sort of stuck. Stuck's not the right word. We're sort of in the quicksand, kind of going, are we drowning fully? Is this a slow death cut by 1,000, paper cuts? Or are we going to pull out of this? Are we going to get a safety net that pulls us out of this thing? Has any of this adjusted, any of this climate that we're in, changed your perception of Etch? At one moment, did you wake up in a cold sweat going, yeah, maybe I should make this a SaaS app instead? Like, what did you think? Or how has this adjusted this?
We've had internal conversations about it, and we think that WordPress is not in any imminent danger. Though, you know, I think a lot remains to be seen how this continues to unfold, obviously. Etch is not reliant on WordPress. It is built for WordPress right now, but a lot of it can be lifted and just plugged into any CMS that we wanted to plug it into. So we could move it. Now, I don't want to. I want WordPress to work. I want the situation we're in to be, the situation going forward. Like, WordPress has so much to offer the community, the ecosystem. There's just too much potential there. It would just be nice for that to keep chugging along. If for some reason it just imploded, we would be okay. We would be able to choose a new CMS and plug it in and move forward. We just don't want that to be the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I put out a blog post at the start of the year, some predictions around WordPress. I think what we're going to see is automatic tighten the belt. I mean, we already see that, right? We've seen sort of this pullback, clawback on open source time. We don't know how that's going to affect this. We don't even know if this is just like theater for the courts at this point. Yeah. But something tells me that automatic has to get a lot more serious in their profitability, right? I don't want to talk about AI because there's so many things. It would take us off track a little bit, but that is something that I think is also it will detract some of WordPress's market share, right? And sheer just attention. Let's just talk about attention for the next couple of years. I think anyone who's going to invest in a software company at the scale of automatic and above, they're going to be like, what are you doing with AI, right? And I think that is something that automatic probably deeply understands at this point and is either trying to figure it out behind the scenes. Look, at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is they just need to be more profitable. And I think and more serious about their core product, which is WordPress and WooCommerce.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that change. And I think I don't really have a question or this, but if you have thoughts on that, on them tightening the belt and how that affects product companies like you and me at Gravity Forms, would you think they're going to just come for all of our lunches? And do you think it'll remain open source for us to thrive in?
I honestly don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that they're they are investing now in AI. James LePage, they brought him on board and acquired his company. He just put out a great video, by the way, of using voice to do a lot of different stuff in WordPress, which is fantastic. So I think they recognize that area. They're moving more heavily into that area. The pullback from automatic funding WordPress feels to me like it's almost could be done just as a punishment to it's like, do they need to be doing that? I don't know. Maybe it's to demonstrate, hey, look, without us, this thing doesn't really go anywhere or do anything meaningful. But I don't know what it all means. And instead of trying to sort it out, I'm just kind of waiting for it to sort itself out, because there's nothing I can do about it anyway. We're just along for the ride.
Yeah. Well, some of your fans want you to fork WordPress, so let's talk about that. Listen, this is something that I think is, and there are some examples of this. We have Classic Press, which is probably the only true fork that I really know about.
Which, by the way, is shockingly.
I saw you tweet it, but did you get feedback on?
Well, from what I can tell, it's shockingly low adoption. I think a couple of years ago, there was a stat that it was 5,000 active installs or something like that. So, which is automatic CSS is way beyond that. I was shocked at the low adoption of that.
Let me do my due diligence here and share the screen so folks can see what we're talking about, and you get a glimpse of Classic Press. So here's Classic Press up on the screen. Version 2.3.1 is out. I'm not here to bash any of these initiatives, but really just to prove a point that this stuff isn't easy. We're going to chat a little bit about that in a moment here, but I think one of the hardest hurdles to get over in forking anything really is, as much as we complain about, well, WordPress doesn't market itself well, the brand isn't there, they don't do any marketing, there's no ads, there's certainly not like Wix and Squarespace, but people know it. And that's the challenge that we live in. Yeah, it's great that there is a fork, and Classic Press is one of those that I know, and I think at the high level, this is, if you don't like Gutenberg, you can run this. But what it tells me is two things. One, people really don't want it and will still live with core WordPress and maybe just disable Gutenberg that way. Why? Because they feel safer doing that. That's at the end of the day, that's the issue. Is they're going to be like, you know what? Love the idea of Classic Press. Do I want to go to that? Oh, God, I don't know. And these are just signals that say, to me, people are still going to stick with WordPress as hard as folks might try. And that's a particular challenge. Like, you probably wouldn't start developing for Classic Press if there were requirements for Etch. You would just look at that as a total addressable market and be like, why would great idea, but I can't support it. I mean, it probably would work with Etch, but let's just say it didn't. You probably wouldn't support it, because how could you even, split time developing for core WordPress?
We just talked about this with automatic CSS, because I had it came up because a few ACSS users asked us about why it wouldn't. There was something, it wouldn't load in Classic Press in a certain context or something. Bricks does, and I think it was loading in Bricks, but there was some other context it wasn't loading in. And we looked at it as a team, and Matteo had asked me, is it even worth pursuing this? And they looked at the fix, and it was literally like one line of code. And so I was like, okay, one line of code, we can stick it in and make it work. But we're not investing a bunch of time and energy pursuing that, because there's just no ecosystem around it, right? I think Marcus in the chat, maybe don't use the word classic in your forward-thinking CMS. It's a great point. The branding, and that actually would take me into my main point. There's the technical side of a fork, and then there's the marketing, momentum, funding, financing, profitability side of a fork, right? You can have all the technical pieces in place. You can have a team that can absolutely handle the technical aspects of forking WordPress, and that doesn't mean anything for the success of that fork. You have to be able to market it, and you have to be able to market it at a certain pace and a certain speed, because you only have a limited runway to achieve escape velocity before people start to come to the conclusion that this thing's not going anywhere. If it doesn't go anywhere quickly, they just feel like it's not going to go anywhere, and it's just going to linger, and all of your investment and time and all of that goes down the drain. And so, yeah, it's way more complicated than people actually make it out to be.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Yoast and Kareem Maruki from Crowd Favorite put out this, I guess, duo post and earlier in the holidays, and I don't have any other insider information. I'm not breaking any news for them. They've not contacted me about anything. I'm just a spectator like everybody else, and I see these things. And these things being, and I'll get the blog post up as I talk. And I see these initiatives to, instill better governance. I see, trying to rally for new leadership and different ways to counsel WordPress. And I just sit back and go, this is great. These are great thought concepts, but unfortunately, I don't know any way that you're going to wrangle the control away from Matt. Otherwise, this is just cheerleading on the side for a better future. Yeah, like, I get it. I'm all about it. But I don't think it's going to happen unless something out of this WP Engine situation happens where the court says you have to divest this ownership. And I think at the end of the day, Matt would just be like, I'll just delete WordPress.org and spin up my own repo at WordPress.com. Why would he? And it will then launch this concept that I've always had, that you'll go to WordPress.org one day and it'll say the best way to experience WordPress is at WordPress.com or with Jetpack on your web host, and then get WordPress for free down here in like 9-point font. Yeah. And that's the one you can download and go your way. And guess what? I wouldn't care. I would be like, fine, like this just makes business sense to me, and I think Automatic still needs to sustain, as crazy as the situation that we're in. So I love these efforts, but I don't see the real action from this stuff.
So, yeah, I'm guilty of the same thing. I have a little bit different take on it, because the beauty of WordPress is that we can build on top of it. The beauty of WordPress is that it's very extensible. It's, and I actually, we don't need Matt to do anything. We don't need WordPress to do much of anything beyond what it already does, because we can work around its limitations. So when I talk about all of these issues with WordPress and its leadership and where it hasn't gone, really, we're not even talking about where it's gone. It's where it hasn't gone, that it should have gone. I do that because I think WordPress does need better leadership. And so anybody can really step up and offer that leadership and vision for the product. But again, like you said, there has to be an action that people can take, because Matt's not going to give up control. The courts may or may not, make some sort of declaration that has an impact on that in the future. We have to wait and find out. But we can actually have an action right now. For example, I see the vision of Etch in the sense that if I can create custom post types in Etch, if I can create custom fields in Etch, if I can manage my media in Etch, if I can manage my content in Etch, if I can build my pages in Etch, if I can just do the things I want to do that are all part of my normal workflow, I don't really have to interact with WordPress all that much. And so people can come and get a really fantastic experience, and it's on top of WordPress. It's leveraging the CMS side of WordPress, but they don't really have to interact with WordPress all that much. They get to interact with a much more modern environment designed and built for them, and they're just going to have a great experience. And who cares what Matt does at that point, unless he just nukes the brand. That's what we want to avoid, is him just dropping a nuke on the brand in general, where nobody on the outside wants to come into WordPress. That would be a major issue.
Back to AI. I promise I won't go deep into it. I spent a lot of time coding with AI over the last couple of months, and I've been doing it airdropping a video clip to myself, although I just realized I could have just played my tweet. But I spent some time coding with AI and sort of going to this world of React, right? And what I found was a gazillion frameworks, right, for JavaScript. And then not even then you have CSS, you have all this stuff, Tailwind, obviously you know that really well. And there's like a billion others, right? And I think what this, and I don't even know if this is a bad thing, but I mean, you could have Classic Press, and I'm thinking out loud here, but you can have Classic Press. I know there's a bunch of other people that, since all of this stuff went down, like, oh, we're going to do it our way. We're going to build this thing over here. We're going to build that over there. And it's going to be new leadership and it's going to be funded and all this other stuff. And that's fine. But what I found with the JavaScript world is, yeah, there's like these little frameworks and there's like 3 people that maintain it. There's like thousands that are doing it with WordPress.org. And if you make a fork, I think that WordPress, maybe it's just the nature of the software or it's the robustness of the ecosystem that make that so challenging. In other words, like if you make a different WordPress, are you going to have, which I guess we've already talked about, but are you going to have these plugin developers also make sure that their plugins work on your flavor of WordPress? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
I think that's what we need to avoid also. We need to avoid a splintering of the WordPress ecosystem into a bunch of different forks. Like people are saying, fork it. Even if you had one successful fork and a bunch of people, or maybe let's say best case scenario, a giant portion of the current ecosystem move to that new fork, that would be totally fine. What you would want to avoid is like the Me Too of like, okay, we got that fork and then there's this fork and this, and everybody starts trying to do this fork contest, okay? Because if one is successful, guess what that's going to signal? Opportunity. Oh my God, look, they did it. They did a success. Let's go 2. And now you got 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, well, at least for us, that's not a great experience, right? I think we want to avoid that.
I'm going to try to play this clip. I don't want to use Handbrake to convert a .mov file while we're talking, because that'll just melt the internet. I'm going to do this. Hopefully, this works. This is a clip from I think it's called My First Million podcast, which came out earlier this morning. And this features, of course, Matt Mullenweg and talking about some of the drama. But this is something that cuts deep. I tweeted this as well. I'm going to play the clip. This is something that cuts deep because this is something that how folks on the outside, especially tech affluent people, look at WordPress. Let's play this clip. Add this to the stage.
Like I remember like 4 or 6 years ago, something I was looking at, like it said that WordPress was used by something like 30 or 20% of all the websites on the internet. Then recently I went and looked at it and now it's like 40%. Are you guys, and like the thing that struck me, I was like, are you the most under monetized business on earth? Like how are you not like the biggest company on earth? Because I used WordPress and I used WooCommerce, which you also own, at my old company. My WooCommerce license, Sean, I think it was a $300 lifetime or $300 a year. And the product that I was using it was making many millions of dollars. And I've got a friend, Sean, you and I both have a friend who made $100 million off of the $300 a year license or whatever it was. It was like nothing. You guys have to be like the least monetized company there is.
So that cuts deep across, like many levels. Like imagine being Matt and like
was Matt in that conversation?
Matt's in that conversation. Yeah, okay. You don't see it. It cuts to him.
Stabbed him in the chest right there.
Yeah, and they actually addressed it later on as sort of like they realized that it was kind of like a backhanded compliment. But again, there's just a little plug for this other project that I'm working on, CMS Minute. You saw this at the top of the show, cmsminute.com. You can subscribe there. It's powered by Ghost, sponsored by Ghost. And I'm talking to other people who run other content management systems, including Statomic, Expression Engine, and Craft. And what do those 3 have in common is that, well, they're not all open source. You can hold that to the side for a moment, but they all have a license, a few $100 a year, just like we're all doing on the WordPress side. Healthy, sustainable content management systems. Are they the size of WordPress? No. Do they need to be? No. And I think like what we saw with Sam's comments, like you're 46% of the he says all websites. And I left the comment just to remind him, it's not all websites, it's content management systems. But, looking at that going, yeah, man, like this is probably why we're a little bit in this situation, because Automatic does need to survive. I think Matt knows that. And I don't think a lot of people agree with it, but there has to be somebody, leading the ship. If it's left to just 1,000 open source contributors, it's probably going to get pretty stagnant compared to like what Automatic did. So,
Yeah.
Again, no direct question, but I'm looking at the larger picture and saying they got to make money, man. And this is the chapter we're in, or era, as you might put it. This is the chapter that Automatic's in, is tighten that belt up.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's stressed about what Automatic has accomplished to this point, what it's giving back to its investors, and so on and so forth. Are we all in agreement that WP Engine was kicking Automatic's ass? Are you on the same page with that?
No, I mean, it had nothing. I did not care.
No, but it's fact, right? That was happening.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny is he does say that he's around the same revenue, which has come out, I guess, in some of this court stuff. I don't know if necessarily, if they were like mopping the floor with them, but he probably looked at it as they're the same size as us and they're not, which I guess we all know that now. It's like they're the same size as us, and they're not contributing as much.
Yeah.
And if he was doing deals behind the scenes with other web hosting, partners about trademark licensing and such, and they weren't, and he flew off the handle, this is the result of it. I don't think they were mopping up the floor, but they were certainly doing well as a managed WordPress.
Okay, but I look at this evidence for me. Like, I've questioned Matt's leadership in terms of development priorities. How WordPress has been handled and treated in terms of taking care of the CMS, upgrading the CMS, modernizing the CMS, prioritizing the CMS, the foray into Gutenberg and the travesty that has been. So I've been very critical of those aspects of his leadership and management. But I've also, in the back of my mind, just been wondering, like, how good is he really at business and marketing? Because I think he pats himself on the back for a lot of WordPress's success and growth. But the reality is that we know there's millions of agencies onboarding millions of people for him. And that, to me, that is where the success of WordPress came from. I know for a fact the thousands of customers that I've talked to and work with, nobody ever requested WordPress. Nobody ever came to me and said, we want to be on WordPress. Do you do WordPress? Do you specialize in that? They said, we need a website. And I said, great, we're going to build it on WordPress. And then 90% of the time they were like, what's that? And then I educate them, and then now they're a WordPress user, and now WordPress is 40% of the internet. That's not like Matt did that. That's agencies did that, onboarding people into the real world. And then I look at, well, what about these acquisitions that he's had? These other, and then I look at something like Tumblr. Oh, okay, total failure, right? Like, so where is the track record of greatness in development leadership? I mean, I think he's completely out of touch with what a modern agency actually does day to day and what they need WordPress to do. And then the WP Engine thing, that's the evidence for me. Imagine that you have the competitive advantage of being called the thing that everybody wants. WordPress.com. He talks about confusion. WordPress.com is the most confusing thing. And we've talked about the confusion of .com since the beginning of time, that everybody's like, what exactly is that purpose of that? And so, and customers, like anybody that knows the WordPress name, the advantage you have of them typing in WordPress, going to WordPress.com and believing, oh, that's the official WordPress, that's where I need to sign up. And WP Engine actually doesn't have that and was still kicking your ass. That to me is like, you had the biggest competitive advantage imaginable and you still lost. That's incredible. That's incredible, right? So I've just started questioning, like, is there a good amount of business and marketing acumen really there, or are they kind of just flying by the seat of their pants?
Yeah. To keep it in the realm of forking WordPress, this same challenge is going to happen with the next person. I mean, we've just highlighted that a few minutes ago, talking about Classic Press, talking about these other spin-ups and things like that. Forking WordPress is going to have the same challenges, and maybe even same legal challenges unless you fork it to something else. I'm going to give you sort of let me give you the hint. Well, no, we just talk about it now. So what I really want to see, I don't think I don't think people should fork WordPress. I don't think WordPress should be forked. I think if you're going to do something successfully, unfortunately, it has to be a complete rebuild of a CMS, right? Yeah. And I would even drill that down even further, because I think this is where the challenge of Automatic and WordPress, which I think I said on your show, is twofold. It's many folds, but the two folds that I see is there's the passion and the mission of WordPress to democratize publishing. Hold that thought. To democratize publishing as like the tool that came online, that revolutionized blogging, that made it free and all this other stuff, and freely distributable and open source. And I say we, but I think mostly Matt and Automatic are still holding on to, I don't want to call it baggage, but that legacy North Star, when there's so much of the WordPress community, like you included, who are like, no, we're website professionals and we want a tool to build websites, which don't equal up in my eyes in terms of like users and mission. I'm either going to build software that helps people publish a blog and words on the internet so that they can talk about their tyrannic government, or they can talk about their kids' little league baseball game. And then there's website builders, right? Which is totally different. It's like, how do we make code easier for a website? So I think that Automatic's at odds with that. And when I look at forking, I would love somebody to fork the blogging experience and then let WordPress do whatever it wants to become a better website tool. Because I honestly think that is the direction that Matt has to go, because the forces of the community, forces of the market.
Couldn't he have done that with Tumblr?
I mean, yeah, he could have. Yeah, I mean, and maybe he wants to. That's a different argument, because I think he's up against the same thing we all face as entrepreneurs: is not enough time, not enough people. He might be running out of money, but he was certainly running out of time and people.
What's crazy is you have a priority to make money on one hand, and then you have this other thing that you claim is your mission, which is like to democratize publishing for anybody's Bunko Club website. You're not monetizing that. You're not making any money off of that. Your core mission is to not make money. And then you have this anxiety of like, where am I going to make the money? And then all the agencies, just imagine, this is why I say, like, is there real business acumen there? The agencies, the businesses, the people with money are all like, hey, we need these things. We need these features. He's like, fuck you. You're like, I don't care. That you're not our mission, right? That's essentially what he said for years. It's just he doesn't pay attention really to like the middle America agencies. And that, like, then he's like, we're running out of money. Shocking. None of the decisions make sense to me.
Yeah. Something you said earlier about putting the website together and customers not asking for WordPress. And this is the unfortunate truth. And every day I wake up going, why do I continue to cover WordPress, and why do I, to continue to make this content? When I was shipping websites at my agency, which I ran for a decade, was at the end of the day, not only did I not have a customer come to me, well, eventually we had a couple enterprisey type customers that came to us for WordPress specifically, but the vast majority of people are like, I just need something. What do you got? Not only did they not come to me for WordPress, they weren't even happy with the software once I shipped it, which is so aggravating, right? Because you're like, God, this thing is great. This thing is more powerful than that thing that's out there. And you're not going to get charged as much as that, but you get you get beat up by that question all the time. I used to sell Chevrolets and Cadillacs before, I don't know if Chevys are good anymore, but certainly well before Cadillac was popular. We're talking about, DeVilles and Sevilles, the big old Cadillacs that only old people drove, before every rapper had an Escalade and they became popular. And you would constantly, I would constantly get beat up as a salesperson. Like, you're trying to sell me this Chevy Lumina when the, Nissan Maxima and Honda Accord are just way better cars. And it's the same thing. Like in WordPress, you're like, but no, this thing is great. And people look at it and go, this is freaking confusing. It's old looking. So after a while, what I'm getting at is I agree with you. So like after a while, you're just like, damn,
Yeah.
like, yeah, is there a better solution out there? And do I need to care about WordPress? I don't think forking's the answer. I think you just look at the alternatives that
Like
exist.
70% of what you just said is the UI and the UX.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like if that was just prioritized and they could at least ship that. It's embarrassing to hand off a site to a client and they open it and it's like 1998 or 2008 or whatever. It's like it's like a reminiscent of like Windows, like all the old stuff of the. Yeah, it's like, man, should we be on like a modern? Did you really put us on the best platform? As bad as customers are at like deciphering design, they can realize when something's old, and WordPress just looks and feels old. And that could be fixed, I think, in a few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a time thing now. If Automatic continues with what I'll call like the in-house investment into WordPress. Well, let me frame this question towards you, and then let's get into the publishing side of things. How much do you care about having a, air quotes, better let's say WordPress.com came out with a fantastic UI, which I don't think they'll do, but let's say they did. And it was just amazing looking, but it was reserved for WordPress.com. And WordPress.org just got the scraps, if you will. Yeah. We just had our UI that we have now. Are you cool with that future of .com getting the better features and then .org getting the open source scraps? Harsh way to put it, but that's how I'll phrase it. What are your thoughts?
If we actually had control over the open source side of the project, like if we could actually be contributors, like he's always saying contribute, where's your code? Where's your commits? Where's your this? Where's your track ticket? And I've always pushed back on that because there's no transparency as to whose tickets get prioritized, whose commits actually get merged. Those and we know that it's likely very political. So the idea that you would tell me to like play this game where I don't even know what the rules of the game are, and I don't even know which players get prioritized or deprioritized or whatever. It's a way for him to divert noisemakers into like a black hole, essentially, right? Because I could go off and start putting commits in and track tickets in, and I could spend all my time doing that, and then they never do anything with it, and then I just get fed up and leave. And I think that's actually what he wants to happen. That's like his preferred thing. Now, I think you bring up a great point about what if they did this with .com and they did not push that to .org. Hey, shout out to all my close to core peeps. Okay, where are the close to core people at now? Where they said, oh, we should use the block editor because it's close to core. We should do XYZ because it's close to core. And they actually said, don't use third-party devs. That's too risky. It's too risky to use an Etch. It's too risky to use a Bricks. Well, from what I can tell, the third-party devs are the one doing all of the innovation, and the close to core is collapsing. Okay, and so I want those people to come explain to me now why it's so important to be close to core, as I've heard repeatedly over and over. Because last time I checked, few weeks ago, the plug, the money for core just got pulled, right? And now nobody knows, well, is the block editor going to get any other enhancements? Is the UI project that's half done ever going to get finished? Don't know. So where there's, I would love for those people to come in and explain to me the value of being close to core.
This is an interesting concept. One, because I started a product many years ago that failed because I stayed too close to core. It was a page builder called the Conductor. And what we were doing is we were building blocks of content, right? So it was query block, display the content, right? Because like a gazillion of us in the agency world, we get and I'm talking, I don't even know anymore, 15 years ago, I think I guess I did this, or 12 years ago. I don't know what the date is. You're building websites, you're doing the same thing over again, you're displaying. I did a lot of media sites, so like local news and journalism sites and stuff like that. So it was always like, hey, build me a homepage with featured story, all the shit we do now that we take for granted. Yeah. And then the sports section, the tech section, yada, yada, yada. So we're like, well, we're doing this all the time. Stamp and repeat this in a plugin. Let's call it Conductor. I wanted to build a product just like everybody else. And the thing to do was to stay close to core. And what was core giving us? It was the customizer, which was supposed supposed to be the future of like building WordPress, and that was a massive failure. It was just, not only was it difficult to develop in, for reasons I don't know, but my developer knew. It just wasn't a good experience, and I tried doing that. The only argument I would say on keeping things close to core in the concept of like, I guess, look and feel of WordPress, which we just said is a detriment to it, but look and feel is you're not, if everyone's sort of agreeing that we're staying close to core in terms of like look and feel, we're not ruining the experience for everyone, and everyone being like anyone who touches that WordPress website. So it's like something that ripples out into the world. But also, we just talked about it's a detriment because it doesn't get updated fast enough. Maybe we'll see that, in the future with data views and the WordPress admin getting redesigned. Maybe. Back to the forking thing and the publishing. I would love to see the forking of a new piece of software that is for blogging only. And I'll tell you another reason why, and why forking is so challenging, is because WordPress has just massive distribution. I think you and I talked about this at I almost said Pressnomics, WordCamp, this past WordCamp, and massive distribution. And that is something that is very hard to unseat, especially if you're going to fork something. And I would say like Classic Press would, and maybe they are, I don't know, buddy up with some smaller web hosts. The web hosting world is pretty big. There's a lot of like big but small web hosts out there that can help you distribute your project. So unseating that is very difficult. And I think if I'm reading the tea leaves of Automatic, I think at one point they thought they could monetize WordPress as a whole through Jetpack. Now I think it's just one way that they're doing it. But I think the real Trojan horse is WordPress, WP Cloud, the cloud infrastructure. Because now Matt can turn to a web hosting company and go, well, instead of trying to get you to distribute Jetpack and make WordPress better, how about I give you all the infrastructure, right? Which is super hard to replicate as a tech company and bring those costs down, right? Because now they can leverage every time, the more they grow .com, the greater volume of their infrastructure, bandwidth, CDN, all the stuff, storage, video, shrinks. The more that they sell that, Bluehost is now a partner of WP Cloud. So that's going to be really difficult to unseat as well. So I think if we're going to fork it, you got to move to something that is a little bit more lightweight. You can't try to take on the whole WordPress nut. And in my opinion, it should be a blogging tool to revitalize growth of the publishing side again, which is great for all humans to be able to publish words on the internet, and then just let WordPress go the way of Website Builder. That's my final say in the forking side.
Yeah, I just, who's going to make those decisions and who's going to make that happen, right?
We're still,
Nobody.
Publishing on the web. Let's chat about that. I am a huge fan of blogging. I'm a huge fan of audio podcasting. As we sit here and do live video on YouTube, I'm a huge fan of audio podcasting, and why? It's because of the RSS feed. The unsung hero of freedom on the internet is the way that I see it. And I think that when it comes to doing the stuff like we're doing right now, especially in the podcasting world, we saw Spotify try to own podcasting. If you follow the news, I worked 3 years in the podcast audio industry, worked at a podcast hosting company called Castos. Automatic actually was a seed investor in them. And Spotify tried for a few years, right? Since they had acquired Joe Rogan, the rights to Joe Rogan, and everything was only Spotify distributed. They really leaned into just like, oh, we're the place for podcasting. And it didn't work. Like the whole like closed ecosystem thing didn't work. And now YouTube is trying to do it. And now everyone is saying, well, video is the next thing for podcasting. But in my opinion, it isn't, because it's still just tied to YouTube. It's in their closed ecosystem, and they don't care about open RSS distribution. So thoughts on publishing and how you see YouTube or podcasting, especially now that you have your ongoing podcast with Mark?
Well, I mean, first of all, I will sing the praises of RSS. Like I was a huge RSS feed user back in the day, and I was shocked when it went away. Like people just stopped caring about it and using it. Seemingly, it's used a lot behind the scenes, but I wish it would come back. Like I love being able to just pipe all of these different sources into my own reader and get up to speed on everything that I actually care about. Right. Yeah, I think that, well, in WordPress, on the WordPress side of things, they do care a lot about publishing, but it's very myopic in the sense that they care heavily about text-based publishing. And it's to a detriment now. We were on YouTube creator calls or whatever they were called. And, many times people in the deep inside of WordPress would constantly talk about blogging and constantly talk about WordPress being for blogging and helping people blog. And that's fantastic. That's great. Like I still blog. You can go to geary.co. You can see my blog. It's up to date. There's a lot of good information on it, but blogging, like text-based blogging, is not the primary channel of the modern era. It's video and it's audio. And it is great to allow people to publish text, but what is the solution and what is WordPress doing to help people publish more video and publish more audio? And the answer is not a lot. They are very, very tied to the text side of things, when the industry or the market has clearly moved away and deviated from that into these other areas very, very heavily.
Yeah. The challenge I have on the podcasting side is it's almost like the same argument, which might be like this whole, not even argument, but debate, which kind of goes back to like the open source WordPress side, is we shouldn't want for that market to take over on distributing a medium that we don't have control over. So again, just like for the YouTube, right, for the sake of the podcasting argument, is they're only going to ever care about video on YouTube. They're not going to help you monetize in any other way, and if they are, they're going to just like consume their larger chunk of your revenue, and they're certainly not going to help you distribute video to other platforms, right? Technically probably just impossible, but also they would never help you on the audio side either. And the industry of podcasting is going, well, we can't make money on, and by industry I mean like that, really it's the ad industries, and maybe people like Amazon, who own, I'm going to forget the name of the big audio industry that helps create their shows, but they can't make money on this audio being distributed to anyone's podcast app because it's all free and independent, right? They can't even put a pixel on the audio to understand like who's listening to this stuff, because RSS and the open systems, just there's no way to track it like that, like they could if it was just Spotify or just YouTube. And I think what we do is if we don't rally for that old school blog and audio, we are giving up those freedoms in the long run. That's just, I don't want to say it's a conspiracy theory, but like that's my take on it. Like if we don't defend those
I don't know.
freedoms,
really
then we're
true?
screwed.
Is that really true? Like if what's my app here that I use? So Overcast, right? I use Overcast. Yep. I think that's just audio. I don't think any video podcast.
Yeah, he doesn't do video.
The video in. Yep. But I believe Overcast has the technology. For example, if they wanted to monetize, they have the ability to inject ads at the beginning of somebody's content or the end of somebody's content. That doesn't have to natively be in the content itself. It can be injected. They could split the episode and inject it into the middle if they wanted to. And so they can monetize that. If they did pipe in video, they could do the exact same thing with video and video advertising. And so to me, Overcast has an opportunity to monetize in that fashion with somebody else's content simply by building the app and serving the app to people and letting that be a way for people to access the feeds that they want to access. WordPress can do the same thing on the publishing side. I think we're beholden to YouTube. We're beholden to Spotify. We're beholden to these other places because these are the places that allow us to host video, because we can't do it via WordPress. We can't do it with our audio easily via WordPress, at least not natively. You got a bunch of add-ons and things like that you have to manage. So, but the ethos of WordPress, shouldn't the mission of WordPress as a publisher, a publishing platform be, yes, you can publish blog articles, but you can also publish video and you can also publish audio, because these are the things you should be able to publish. Just as a principle, I understand that there's technical things that have to be worked out, but as a principle, shouldn't that be the focus, the future mission?
Yeah. So the issue, I believe, again, thinking out loud, my issue is places like YouTube realize that video is far too expensive for the average user to be able to host themselves. It was certainly expensive for Castos to when I worked there, to host video for folks, and we did. So it's loss leader stuff, right? So if you had a podcast that was actually, paying for the video account, I don't even remember what the price was, $50 a month. I don't know what it is, but if they had video for every episode, like, you were losing money on that account and making up for the difference of the podcaster who never did video but was paying for a video account, right? It's like, the typical game.
Right.
I don't think that I think video is I don't want to say it's bad.
Why? Yeah. What do you? By the way, I think you have like a agenda against video or something, or non-text based publishing.
Because it's so hard to distribute. And I like content, for better or worse, that is easy to distribute, right? I think so. Like, RSS isn't dead, and I urge everyone to remind themselves, like, RSS isn't dead, and it is a technology that can be pushed forward. But people don't push forward because of the modern web going to like APIs and all this other stuff. But let me take you into my conspiracy theory head for a second, Kevin. Like, this is like deep stuff. Like,
yeah, let's go.
You don't even want to be associated with these thoughts. I think that there should be a world where there is like WhisperNet, right? Which is Amazon's low frequency internet. I'll call it internet, Wi-Fi or whatever. It's the same shit that helps you download an ebook to your Kindle, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have Wi-Fi. I think we should have a low frequency internet that is just text based for the end of the world, right? Because in the end of the world scenario, we aren't streaming video anymore. Right? I'm radioing to you down in Atlanta going, hey man, they're on the shores of Massachusetts. Where's the guns? Right? And I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to stop there and go, let me get the light right and then send you a video. We're not going to have transmission like that. So I think like text and words on a page, or audio, which is much easier to create and distribute, is the mediums that we should look at for like longevity and freedoms of distribution. And video is a thing which is amazing to get seen and to be found and do some really cool shit with, but it's one of those things that like, if you believe in it or not believe in it, but if you want it all the time, it locks you in to a situation that's either too expensive or too hard to distribute. So that's my issue. I love video, but it's also one of those things where it locks you in at a cost and a distribution that you can't replicate.
Okay. So you want people to effectively, you want WordPress to move into like Morse code territory.
This is unrelated to WordPress. Like this is certainly not related to WordPress.
Okay. Yeah, because we were talking about public, and I'm not going to be blogging in the end of the world either. Morse code maybe, right? So but I also think like we're talking about the mission of innovation. It's not always let's fall back to like what do we need when the world ends. It's like what can we do better than we're doing right now. I think video is the best format. Video 100% is the best format. You can see things, you can hear it at the same time. It has audio in it, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's based on things that people conceptualize, whether they wrote it down or they're just talking off the top of their head. So you get all of the best worlds in one. Is it expensive? Yes, as people pointed out in the chat. Ken pointed out it's very expensive. That is not a when you're looking at innovating, and by the way, that's why I always take it back to what is the principle of the platform? Is the principle of the platform that we should be publishing audio, text, and video? Yes or no? And I think it's obvious people say, yes, get rid of all the technical limitations. You have people, all innovators that have done great things just started with a first principle of, should the world work this way? And people say, yes, great. Now let's figure it out. That's where the solutions come from. If you shut it down by saying, well, that's too expensive for our current architecture, or this is a little too challenging, right? Of course, it's going to stay that way because nobody's actively trying to fix it or do better, right? So we have to go back to the principle of, should we be focused on publishing video and audio? Yes. Okay. Now, how are we going to make that happen? And we can find ways to make it cheaper. We can find ways to make it faster. We can innovate something that maybe doesn't currently exist that solves this problem. But until we actually start going in that direction, nothing is going to happen.
The other issue with video, I'm just loading up some bookmarks to share on the screen, is that it is primarily a YouTube. It's primarily a YouTube play, and let's just call YouTube a social network because I would largely kind of feel like it is. It's just tied into the algorithm, right? It's tied into the same issues, for better or worse. I think we talked about on your podcast the van shows that you've been watching and how like you've discovered a new creator who's doing vans. Probably that person would never be found if it weren't for the algorithm. Totally agree. There's some benefits there. But then there's also the negatives where you just keep feeding the machine as a creator. And you probably know this too, watching stats, keywords, yada, yada, yada. And that sucks. And then it's like, if the algorithm doesn't favor you or somebody in the algorithm doesn't want to favor you any longer, this press of a button and like all of your Google and YouTube juice are gone. And I don't like that. I tweeted out when I posted my Why CMS Minute post yesterday, somebody was like, I'm not reading this because you didn't sell it to me in 1 minute or in under a minute or something like that. And I'm like, guy, I have never posted anything to sell anyone. Like, I'm not trying to hook anyone. I'm just putting my stuff out there. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, let's move on. And that's a problem with me. Like, I don't look at YouTube as any of my content.
YouTube
doing that stuff.
What you're describing YouTube is the result of not pursuing video publishing yourself, right? A solution for video, because YouTube is the only thing that can do it right now. Other than short form, like TikTok obviously is a thing, but like I can publish my own blog articles, right? I can publish that on my site. It lives on my site. I own that data. I can take the link to it. I can go to Twitter and I can share it. I can go to Facebook and I can share it. I can go to these distribution channels and share it, but it's mine. I can't do that with video. I'm beholden to YouTube. I'm beholden to the algorithm. And by the way, that's the only real platform available because we've made it so, right? Because of that, everybody else has succumbed to it's too expensive. There's too many technical challenges. If we pursued owning that data ourselves, finding ways to make it cheaper, finding ways to where I could have videos on my site that I own that data, I'm hosting that data, and then I can go out and just share it in the places I need it distributed. I get the best of both worlds because I own the data, but these other channels can distribute it for me. And they have far less control over my distribution of that content than they do now when I also have to host the video with them, and then they can manipulate it however they want to.
Yeah. It's why I go back to RSS, right? This is why, like, in a world...
Yeah, I love RSS.
Yeah, in a world where... So up on the screen right now, for those who might have looked away from the video, is VideoPress, which ends up getting sold and bundled into Jetpack. I think VideoPress is one of the best products that Automatic puts out. In terms of like a packaged product, like the design, the style, the look and feel of this stuff. But once you go to buy it, it just forks you over to, shoots you over to Jetpack, and then you're just like, what the hell's going on? But for $10 a month, 1 terabyte of storage, and I guess bandwidth is unlimited up until that 1 terabyte of storage that you hit. This stuff would be amazing, and. This conversation then goes deeper into like big tech channels that don't like RSS, like Google, in fact, killing off their Google RSS reader and killing off their podcast app April last year, so that any podcast that you go to, you have to go through YouTube Music or Google Music to get access to that. And these platforms don't want that stuff. I mean, this is why I look at something like, at least now, like like if you look at social networks, there's no more API access unless you're like the size of Zapier or something like that, who's paying for API access to Twitter. If you gave me a social network that allowed me to integrate my RSS feed with, and everyone just, if RSS was just as ubiquitous as your email address and everybody understood, the world would be a different place for social networks.
Yeah. Sure.
Mastodon, I guess technically is that. You look at the Fediverse, you look at this stuff. Is it sexy? No. Is it technical? Yes. And that's the part that holds it back, right? It's the same thing that we argue with WordPress. It's like, if this shit was better, you know, back to my end of world days, like, yeah, man, you want algorithm-free, less sales-driven social networks, just go to Mastodon. But it's too technical. I don't like it. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like the freedom is kind of boring and ugly and technical sometimes. And I like a dose of algorithm. Yes, it certainly helps me find people on YouTube, helps me find things on Twitter.
By the way, that's the other thing that made WordPress that's the one thing. Well, and who did this? You know, was it Matt? Was it hosting companies? Whatever. But the one-click install of what, like, that opened the door to so many people, where it went from a technical installation process to a one click, I'm set up, I'm rocking and rolling, right? So the less technical users could get on and start doing things with it. I think that was a big part of it. So yeah, you have these areas of the internet where there's a lot of freedom, but they also tend to be very technical, right? That has to be fixed for sure.
All right, we're going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes here. We're just over the hour mark. If anybody has any questions, throw those in. We're going to go down one more conspiracy hole real quick. No, it's not a conspiracy. It's podcasting 2.0. We've talked about this before on another episode that we did. Podcasting 2.0 is an open source movement where these folks are enhancing RSS as much as possible. You can get involved by going to the podcast index GitHub repo. I have that up on the screen. Fun fact about the Marco Arment, the guy behind Overcast. Overcast is is the most popular third-party podcast app for podcasting. There's a tag here, and this is just to get you into his thinking. Which goes a little bit deeper, but monetization, like, he's against doing any kind of monetization other than what he's already doing with, you can buy display ads in categories on his app. And a perfect example is this right inside the podcasting 2.0 spec. If you're on a podcast hosting company that supports the funding tag, and the funding tag is literally just a space in your RSS feed that says, put a link here where you want somebody to go to pay you. And if we look at the podcast index, which is the largest podcast index on the web, part of the Podcasting 2.0 project, I'll zoom in so folks can see it. Listen, design is not their first.
I was going to say, we're already
is their first objective here, but
already a lot to be desired on the presentation front.
Yeah, these icons that pop up, this is just pulled from the RSS feed. So this is my funding tag, and this is Podcasting 2.0, which is you can pay Bitcoin. But this one right here, it's literally just a text field that any podcast hosting company can implement in the feed. The difference is once they implement this little text field that all you have to do is paste in a link. Like when I click this, it's going to go to the WP Minute for joining or donating. All it is a text field. The podcast apps simply have to adopt that. And in the case of Overcast, for example, he is against it because he doesn't want, he doesn't want to have to support it. Like, he doesn't want the average podcast user to click it and then ask him, what is this about? Right? So if you can imagine the millions of podcasts and people click on it and they start emailing him like, what is this money that I have to give? He doesn't want that. And he doesn't want Apple to go after him. In some like obscure legal battle where they're like, hey, you owe us 30% of all this money that just went through your app. And he's like, whoa, that's not me.
Yeah.
So it's a battle between, it's a very difficult battle, I guess is what I'm getting at. But I wanted to highlight Podcasting 2.0 if you're a podcast fan or fanatic and you want to get into the open source side of it. These guys push a lot. They do a lot with the RSS feed. So don't let the RSS feed die. Whew. Thanks for hanging out today, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always fun.
If the invading enemy shows up in Boston first, I'll telegram you.
Yeah.
Do you have a pigeon perch? I can release my pigeon and it'll fly down to say, protect yourself. They did that back in the 1700s. We might do it again You never know. Thanks for watching, everybody. The WPminute.com, the WPminute.com/subscribe. Kevin, where do you want folks to go to say thanks?
Everything's at geary.co, but if you're interested in getting the March launch of Etch, go get on the list at etchwp.com.
Awesome stuff. Everybody, thanks for hanging out today. We'll see you in the next one.